What do you think about Sabo and what has happened to him? What if I told you that he's bringing Vivi and the revolutionaries to Luffy right this moment? That he will be more important to the story than Ace, and that I've actually shed a tear while writing the script? Actually, on second thought, don't answer that last one. Okay, real talk for a second. As you know, the reason I love One Piece so much is not because of the fights or the powers or even the world building. All of these are absolutely fantastic, no question about it. But to me, what puts One Piece above other great works of fiction is its out-of-this-world character writing. Not only does the story have one of the biggest cast of characters ever, but pretty much every single one of them has their own personality, development, and purpose in the story. Everyone feels like they belong into this world, and each and every one of them does their part to make One Piece the epic adventure it is. Which brings me back to Sabo. I've wanted to talk about Sabo for a while now because, in a weird way, he seems to be the odd one out here. Not just for me, but many others as well. The Amnesia plotline was not very well received. I mean, you can't tell me Sabo never saw an image of Ace in a newspaper before. And in many ways, Sabo's only role can easily be mistaken as a replacement for Ace. And objectively speaking, at this point in the story, if nothing else happened with him, I would go so far as to call him the only bad character in the story because he doesn't really seem to contribute to Luffy's story. However, and this is where this video finally turns positive, I finally realized that by thinking this way, I might not only have judged Sabo's role in the story extremely prematurely, but even worse, I probably have actually drastically underestimated the potential Sabo has for Luffy and the endgame of the story overall. Hi, my name is Manu, and as an older brother myself, I think I've finally figured out what Sabo's character is all about, what has happened to him during the Reverie, and what role he has to play at the end of the story. Despite being one of the most influential people in Luffy's life, I was surprised how late in the story Sabo was actually introduced. The first time we learn about his existence is during Luffy's flashback after the end of Marineford.
Sabo! Sabo, いるか? Ace!
I've seen a lot of people speculate that Oda just wrote Sabo into the story at that point on a whim, but I'm convinced that Sabo was part of Oda's plans right from the start, which is also why I'm not worried at all about him being a character with no purpose. Here is just some of the early foreshadowing by Oda. His first possible appearance might have been in chapter 99, where we see someone looking suspiciously like Sabo in the crowd as Buggy plans to execute Luffy. This would actually make further sense because it is also Dragon's first appearance in the story. Next, we have the flashback of Luffy and Ace sharing sake to become brothers, and as you can see in the top left corner, there is a third cup just barely visible. Another hint that hit me really hard when I realized what it meant was Ace's tattoo that we first get to see in Alabasta. At first glance, it looks like he found himself the world's worst tattoo artist that managed to misspell Ace with an S. But then we see Sabo set out to sea. It's not a strike-through ass after all. Ace has literally tattooed Sabo's Jolly Roger on his arm as a tribute from the last time he saw his brother before seeing him die at the hands of the Celestial Dragons. Gotta be real, I teared up a little bit when I heard that first time. I hope you agree that most likely Sabo was always part of Oda's plan. But what then is his purpose in the story? Is it merely being a replacement for Ace? And the answer to that is kinda, but not really, but definitely in a good way. Okay, so Sabo actually has 3 important roles in the story. For the first of these, we have to go back all the way to Luffy's childhood. Sabo shaped both Luffy and Ace into the great pirates that they later would become. Ace, suffering under his heritage, was always in a very dark place. It was only thanks to Sabo that he was able to find someone he could truly trust and forget his worries with. On top of this, Sabo served as the relaxed and positive moderator between him and Luffy, as both were very headstrong and impulsive. In my opinion, Sabo might well be part of the reason Luffy is so incredibly tolerant towards everyone. Even though they were living in poverty in the shadow of the nobles, Sabo, who was a noble himself, was just another friend and brother to Luffy. It taught our protagonist that a person is made by their actions and not by their heritage. Even better, since Sabo was well educated, he most likely contributed most of the knowledge that Luffy and Ace got as children. But most importantly, Sabo was one of the key factors that inspired both Luffy and Ace to become great pirates. Shanks was definitely a major driver for Luffy as well. However, I feel like it is this scene here, when Luffy learns about Sabo's death for the very first time, where a lot of Luffy's ideals and even his big dream can be traced back to.
怯えてることがあったろうか。幸せじゃなかったんだ。
Luffy realizing that Sabo tried to become a pirate in order to find happiness is basically the premise for each and every one of his crewmates. He finds great people that, just like Sabo, have been in an incredibly dark spot their entire life and gives them true freedom and happiness by making them pirates of his crew. Luffy really goes out of his way to pull people out of their darkness because of Sabo's death and how he and Ace did not realize it, did not try to help him escape his terrible family. This is of course also connected to Ace's death, where Luffy now feels as if he had failed to save not only one, but two brothers. And it's exactly that subtext that makes Luffy's reunion with Sabo so special. Now, the only arc where Sabo had a chance to showcase his current personality so far is Dressrosa. A big criticism I always hear is that Sabo is basically just Ace 2.0, and in a way, these people have a point. Both of them have similar cool older brother vibes, both are powerful members of two of the most influential groups in the story, and both go out of their way to make sure that Luffy can go his own way. Heck, Sabo actually eats Ace's devil fruit and uses some of his moves. However, if you have taken away anything from the many analysis videos I've made on One Piece so far, you will know that Sabo unites two important themes Oda uses: inherited will, as well as the concept of two sides of the same coin, where most elements of post-timeskip One Piece are mirrored and inverted versions of the pre-timeskip. I think it's no coincidence then that Sabo appears in Dressrosa, the arc that mirrors Alabasta in the first half of the Grand Line, where Ace made his first appearance as well. Both arcs serve as setup for Luffy's relationship with his older brothers. That way, Oda could set up Ace's capture at Marineford and whatever has happened to Sabo at the Reverie. I'll get into that in a moment. But to me, saying that these two characters are the same is just not true. Both have their distinct personalities and differences. And even strength-wise, Sabo seems a lot more capable than Ace. He wields the Mera Mera no Mi easily right after eating it, is able to face off with an admiral, and in this scene right here, I'm pretty sure he uses Ryo to split the platform.
Ryusouken. Ryu no Ibuki!
A real beast. Both have their distinct emotional baggage. While Ace feels unwanted and hated by the world, Sabo blames himself for not being there for Ace and Luffy when they needed him the most. In his fight against the Marines, he seems to go a little bit psycho for a while until you realize that he is just very emotional and trying to protect Luffy no matter what. That, or he's just very ecstatic about having subscribed to this channel for more One Piece content every single week. Interestingly enough, Sabo becomes a little bit more like Ace when eating the Mera Mera no Mi, even sharing the same lines as Ace.
エースと似たようなこと言ってやがる。
Now, this could simply be a representation of Sabo inheriting Ace's will to watch over Luffy. But as I've speculated in my video on Devil Fruits here, it might very well be that Devil Fruits themselves store a bit of their previous owner's personality inside them. What really stands out to me though, is the moment that Luffy realizes Sabo is alive and all that Sabo tries to do is lessen Luffy's own burden for not having saved Ace.
ありがとな、ルフィ。生きててくれて嬉しい。
He actually thanks Luffy for being alive like 3 or 4 times, making sure that Luffy doesn't have any more survivor's guilt about Marineford. And speaking of Marineford, there is one really interesting detail there that I think you might like. You of course know that Akainu's real name is actually Sakazuki. But what you might not know is that Sakazuki has an actual meaning in Japanese. The reason his true name is so jarring is that Sakazuki is the Japanese word for a pact of brotherhood over sake cups, which is exactly what Ace, Sabo, and Luffy did to signify their brotherly bonds.
お前ら知ってるか？杯を交わすと兄弟になれるんだ。
Why would Oda choose that name? Well, when you think about it for a second, it actually really fits. While Akainu does kill Ace and takes one Sake Cup brother away from Luffy, Ace's death also cures Sabo's amnesia, giving the other Sake Cup brother back to him and passes his will onto Sabo. Sabo even stated that he felt Ace's spirit lift the fog in his mind as a way of guaranteeing that Luffy always had at least one brother looking out for him. And of course, it might foreshadow Akainu being involved with Sabo at some point in the story as well. So up to this point, I believe that Sabo has already contributed a lot to Luffy and to the story overall. But I personally think that the most important part of his arc is yet to come. And that brings us into the realm of speculation about what has happened at Marijoa to Sabo.
そうに決まってる。あのサボよ。ありえなってブル。バッターシ信じない。落ち着け。
One possibility is of course that Sabo has been killed. That would fit in with a theory I made about Kobe inheriting the Mera Mera no Mi, but even if Sabo were to die at some point, it surely wouldn't be off screen. Another, much more likely possibility, I think, is that Sabo has been captured and is about to be executed. Now, while this would admittedly be a little bit too similar to Ace's fate, it would give Luffy the chance to actually save a brother from the government this time, which I don't hate. However, I personally think that Oda is trying to trick us into believing one or the other. My personal favorite idea is that the government has taken out the King of Alabasta Cobra and also tried to get rid of Vivi in the process. This is supported by Imu picking her image during the reverie. And I think it would be quite likely that Sabo would have gone out of his way to save Vivi just as he saved Rebecca on Dressrosa and running away with her. As a result, the government could have blamed Cobra's death on Sabo, but would still want to keep the news from spreading that a revolutionary was able to infiltrate and escape Marijoa without being caught. Which I think would also explain all the shocked reactions to the newspaper. Remember this scene?
これ一応ルフィのビブルカード作っといた。
いつの間に。
かけらはもらってくよ。
Sabo has a Vivre card of Luffy, and Vivi is bound to return to the crew at some point. So if both of them escape together from Marijoa and Sabo can sense Luffy's Vivre card burning up during his fight on Wano, it would make sense for the pair to make their way towards the Straw Hats, maybe even bringing the rest of the Revolutionary Army along to battle the Marines coming to Wano as well. However, Sabo reuniting with Luffy would have an additional meaning as well. Remember how all his attacks are dragon-based? Well, Sabo is literally the right hand of Dragon himself, and we know that Luffy has no relationship with his father whatsoever. However, Sabo was raised by Dragon instead, and he grew up with Luffy, so who better to bring these two together than Luffy's older brother? And one thing I would really love to see is Sabo and Luffy visiting Ace's grave together at the end of the story. Or, if Luffy should make it, Sabo visiting both of their graves next to each other. I don't know why, but just thinking about that scene at the end of One Piece already puts tears in my eyes. If you don't want to cry now and rather learn why devil fruits may have a will of their own and why Sabo might have inherited Ace's will by eating his devil fruit, just click right on my face. I swear my eyes are just sweating a little bit. Zoom.